talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but these stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday morning and another fine episode of Hair of the Dog. I am Carrie Barber, broadcasting to you live. So if you have questions, comments, complaints, you want to rail or just be noticed, you can join the conversation, whatever platform you're watching us on. Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, our website. Just type in the comments and we'll see most of them. So we invite you to join this conversation today because it's Monday and I think we have some truth telling that needs to happen here, as well as a little quiz for our lovely and talented co-host here, Andy Kennedy. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, Carrie. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I did not have a chance to study for this quiz, and I will not be using Google.
No, Andy didn't know that he was going to be participating in our little quiz show today because I just sprung it on him. But I think it's going to be interesting because for those of you who are not aware, Andy is in Canada. So we're going to quiz Andy on U.S. healthcare in the pandemic of COVID. So this will be interesting and a whole lot of fun to see how a Canadian kind of fares with our healthcare system. I imagine his responses are going to be much like the U.S. because we don't even know how our healthcare system works, apparently. So with that, I want to get started in this celebratory moment. This was forwarded to me, and I want to share it with everyone. So for those of you who are so concerned about your freedoms, and really pushing back on the mask thing, wearing a mask in public around others because you feel like it's a personal affront. So they have now unveiled a statue in honor of your sacrifice. So this was forwarded to me, and it's a statue honoring all the brave men and women who refuse to wear a mask. It's this nice bronze statue of a crying baby. So someone pointed out to me this weekend, and I kind of think it's true, that the anti-vaxxers are the same people doing the mask thing, right? It's the same argument, same non-science. And even what was interesting is, I haven't heard it, but I understand that Eminem has come out with a rap against people who are not wearing masks. And it was kind of scathing from what I've heard. Next thing you know, Trump himself is wearing a mask in public. So I'm not saying the two are related, but maybe.
I was so hoping that his nose would be sticking out.
No, he has staffers to help him with proper placement.
Yes, to hold him down on the floor while they put it on.
Like a diaper. Yeah, exactly. So, wow, that was amazing. So we actually got baby Trump to wear a mask. So if Trump can wear one, you can wear one. So, Andy, my first question for the Canadians. So, Nurse Deb is a scrub nurse in surgery?
Yes, that was an easy one. I'm gonna ace this test.
How long per surgery would you say on average she wears a mask? So when she's going into work and she's scrubbed up and she's got that mask on her face, how long do you think she wears one?
She will keep a mask and a face shield on while she is working, except for breaks and lunch.
So the majority of the day?
Yes, and sometimes that's an N95 mask, depending on the surgery.
Okay, and she, as far as I know, has not died from CO2 inhalation.
Well, I hate to tell people this, but CO2 doesn't kill people. Your body actually makes it, right? So there's lots of videos of clinicians who are wearing an N95 mask, which completely seals to your face, and wearing a monitor that shows your oxygen stats as you're standing there, and with the mask on or off, that the percentage of oxygen that is going into your body doesn't change.
That
Sorry.
is so weird. Well, I was thinking that if Nurse Deb could wear one for hours and hours of surgery, that I might be okay going into a grocery store. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would think so, yes. Yes. Now, if you're going to play with it, right? If you're going to keep touching it because it's bothering you, right? Like for whatever reason, because you're fidgety, or you're trying to portray to people around you that it's really an inconvenience for you to wear it, then you might as well not wear it because it's not protecting you, right?
Okay, interesting suggestion.
So keep your hands off the damn thing. Put it on your face, leave it there. Walk around. And of the number one reason why it would be difficult to wear a mask is this, right? Because the air typically will gather in here, and the biggest gap is here on either side of your nose. So the air shoots up onto your glasses and fogs them up. And if I can have no problem wearing a mask, then nobody else should have either. That's just like it. The reason that people don't want to wear masks is because they don't want to wear masks, right? There's no reason. There's no absolute scientific reason. It saves lives. The reason people don't want to wear masks is because they don't want to wear it.
Well, that's exactly right. That's somebody's telling me what to do in my freedom. So, Joel, good morning. Joel piped up right away. He said, the ones railing against the mask, free my body, are the same group screaming to control uteruses. So this is interesting, right? So do as I say, not as I do. Freedom for my body, but not yours. So yeah, that's an interesting divergence from some sort of logical framework for an argument, but okay. All right. So that was not the only thing that Trump had been talking about this weekend. So failing all other policy discussions, failing his own record, failing his behavior during a pandemic and everything else, the law and order and the thin blue line, he decided that his best argument to win back media support, and for those who are outside of the real progressive area who don't understand media's influence, Trump understands it. That's how he got elected, was through the media and the way that they cover stories. So Trump decided to cater to the media by appealing to their bottom line, which is actually pretty smart. So this is the tweet that he sent out. He said, "Is this what you want for president? With no ratings, media will go down along with our great USA." So on the surface, it sounds utterly ridiculous. This is what he cares about, ratings, but look who he's talking to. They know. They know. And I was having this argument with a family member this weekend because this person this is a Republican who has come over and is a big fan of Rachel Maddow, and was saying, what a great person, this kind of like hero worship post. And I'm like, okay, first off, Rachel Maddow is a millionaire, and Rachel Maddow will not even discuss progressive policies because she's being paid not to. And so the pushback from this person was, well, you're just mad because she's a millionaire. I'm like, no, I don't give a shit how much she makes. I'm putting it in context so that you understand. And what I find extraordinarily interesting, and I'll come back to this conversation because we did delve into healthcare, was There is no greater supporter for the oligarchy than the person who makes $30,000 a year, right? So that's an arbitrary number, but it goes to say that the poor and working class, there are those among us who have been indoctrinated to defend the top 2% at all costs, even to our own detriment. And I think this speaks to Trump's tweet here. So Trump is talking to the people who are running the media, who are the top 2%, and telling them, if you don't cover me, your ratings are going to go down. Well, why would he say this? Why would he make this case? Because he's right. So at first I looked at it and I saw it was trending on Twitter, and I was like, sketchy, but honestly, he's right on this account. So corporate media and their advertising, for example, the Journal of American Medicine had done a study over a year period how much the pharmaceutical industry and insurance companies were spending in advertising and whether that influenced what these corporate media outlets published. And they found 270 billion with a B, in advertising dollars was spent on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, which influenced the reporting that they did, right? So it's just like buying a congressperson. We know that if I were to write a check for $100,000, I'm going to get my phone call answered and the things that I care about listened to more than if you put in your dollar. That's just the way it works, right? That's part of the loss of our democratic republic. It's oligarchy.
Well, sure. There's two reasons for mainstream media. Number one is to keep the narrative of the centrists alive, right? And the number two is to get people to watch, right? The ability to disseminate unbiased news stories has been lost pretty much completely, right? You see memes or gifs on different social media platforms that say there once was a fella by the name of Walter Cronkite. He used to go on every night and read the news in an unbiased way, right? And most people go, oh, really? They let that happen?
Yeah, and do you know, Andy? We can start our quiz now. Why did that stop? What happened? What changed in the U.S. where a Walter Cronkite became a Lou Dobbs?
Well, it's neoliberalism, right? It's the destruction of the middle class and the small businesses, right? So you have these huge multinational, international corporations like, AT&T or Comcast or Bell Media in Canada, where they just went out and bought up all the small mom and pop broadcasting systems, radio, TV, newspapers. And so there's no longer any narrative from that aspect of our society. It's all a narrative of we're just going to report on stories that make us, that make us look good. We are going to only talk about things that that allow us to continue the advantage that we have in society and continue the narrative of pitting people versus people, right? Whites versus blacks, straight versus gay, residents versus immigrants, right? And keep that narrative going. Because if you have an enemy, a perceived enemy in the society, then conceivably you don't have enough time to be mad at and understand how badly your government is screwing you over, right?
Oh, absolutely. So what we're talking about for people who are just tuning in right now is what was called the Fairness Doctrine that came in under the FEC rules, 1940-ish or something, and then was done away with under believe it was Bill Clinton. Somebody want to check that and post in the comments. But so what it, and here's where it gets a little sticky. So the fairness doctrine required somebody like Walter Cronkite to report without the adjectives, without a bias or a perceived bias, and to, you know, here's what happened, and not try to sugarcoat it and whatever else. So when that was done away with, then we had the rise of Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, who came out with an actual bias. And then Andy's point was allowing the consolidation of networks. So now we have 5 companies that own all newspapers, all radio, and the corporate networks. So this is why the work that we're doing here is so important. And not just us. We have a growing network of good reporting that's being done, like at the Gray Zone, the Intercept, things like this, where it is impartial and objective, and from our perspective, you know, we're going to report on progressive policy in an accurate way, not from a corporate perspective, which, depending on your flavor of corporate, far right or center right. This is why what we're doing is important, because we just didn't have this kind of commentary. We don't have the accuracy in reporting. Every time we saw another unarmed black person gunned down by police, it was always a black thug that was murdered by our wonderful police officer. No, we need to report these things accurately so that people can make an informed decision, and it's not this standard cookie cutter narrative across the board. So we're seeing that in our politics, and this is why 3 independent universities have said that the U.S. is no longer a democratic republic in any way. We are a failed democracy now. We are an oligarchy, because you had corporate media and the newspaper over and over and over perpetrating this false narrative, and people, you can't help but be indoctrinated to it. And I think that there's a documentary, The Brainwashing of My Father, and a woman chronicles her dad, who was this loving, great person, and as he got older, we know as people get older, they tend to for the most part slide conservative, because you're nearing the point where a financial loss is not recoverable. So you start to kind of, you know, get a little edgy about your wealth and your risk, and the fear factor goes up.
Well, plus there's also the fact that you're no longer relative to younger people, right? There's a disconnect at some point in your life where, you know, you're in the majority, that your beliefs and understanding are in the majority of society. Eventually you get older, and a new generation comes down below you, and their ideals change, even if it's just slightly. Their likes and dislikes change slightly. And so the disconnect happens that, well, they're just kids and they listen to that shit and that's not music, and I'm keeping this baseball. I warned you, kids. You know, and it's not the kids that have changed. It's you that have changed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
as you get older, that disconnect just gets farther and farther away. And then you try to come to terms with the fact that it is, you're going to be a senior citizen soon, and then that just makes you grumpy.
Well, let's add to it the instability of work, right? So if you work in a corporation, as a lot of people do, or you work in a small business, most people work in a small business, the cost of your employment is much higher than the younger person coming in. So you're dealing with all of this narrative, your own finances, the cost of living goes up, and here comes this young person who's making a fraction of what you make. You might lose your job and find yourself unemployed because they came in. So all of this creates this atmosphere where you, as an older person, have animosity, and you know, in a lot of cases, rightly so. So, part of what we're going to talk about is U.S. bankruptcies for our older generation. This is not necessarily a new phenomenon, but it's been growing over the last decade to a point now during the pandemic. It is alarming, and we're not talking about that in corporate media, so we're going to talk about it here. So, just real quick, good morning to Dave Gutowski, who says the vast majority of Congress is older people. Right. So that goes back to the disconnect that you were just talking about, Andy. If I'm in my 50s, 60s, and 70s, I don't really understand what the 18 to 24-year-old is dealing with college tuition, and then the 24 to 35, 45. Well, hell, you're never going to pay off a student loan now, and you've got bills and things like this at 45. You're in that sandwich generation, still paying off a student loan, and now you've got to care for your children and your parents who are aging. So, yeah, someone in Congress isn't going to have that understanding. They don't know what a banana costs, let alone student loans. So,
Absolutely. It's fascinating that, we all have a time, for the most part, there are exceptions, of course, unfortunate exceptions, but where our parents, either physically or mentally or emotionally, start to decline, and as the children, so it's our almost human duty to take care of our parents and to deal with that. But when we think about it on a whole, on a societal, like in the macroeconomic sense, that we can't give people free stuff, right? We can't allow people to get stuff for free in our society, because that's just unfair. And although on an individual level, there's nothing more strongly in our own minds of taking care of our parents. But basically, we're just throwing that generation that are retiring to the wolves and saying, well, you should have made better choices, or, you should have worked harder, right? I'm not paying for your giving you free money if you made the bad choices.
right. Well, I look at, like, in Asia, particularly in Japan, where they have a veneration of their older generation in some respects. I think here in the West we kind of misunderstand exactly how that culture works. Here we went to the neoliberal view on capitalism. If you cannot work and you cannot produce, you have no value. Therefore, you're a drain on society, and we're going to put you out in the cold and the dark, and you wait for the predators to come get you. So that is literally what we've done. And so, as somebody in their 40s and 50s who, wages have stagnated, benefits keep being right sized, so you pay more of that cost. And then here comes the younger worker who is making a fraction of what you make, and the bean counters at your company are going, maybe we should, what they call greening the workforce. And you see more and more layoffs of the tenured workers. So they're in this position where you are creating a situation where you hate everybody. Get off my lawn, because what's happening to your parents, is coming for you next. And there's no way for you to stop it. So I get that, but we're doing this to ourselves over and over and over. Okay, so David chimed in again. He said, the point is their interests are represented in Congress, meaning the older generation, so they shouldn't be fearful, right? That's why they are fearful of being older. It's because the system is foobarred and they know it. So this is part of that. We won't talk about it, we won't admit it, but we know that it doesn't work. So therefore, we're gonna, rail against any kind of change. And this is where the reticence to change comes from. So that kind of leads me into we haven't talked about it, and I myself have not gone through page by page by page, but this was the 100 plus pages that came out from Bernie and Biden, their teams, not they themselves, but their teams working on the unity. So this is Unity 2.0 in an effort to unify the left, which is weird to me because Biden is out there recruiting on the right for VP and he's soliciting all of these people, and you get the Lincoln Project. So he is totally focused on the right. It's weird to me that they're reaching out to the left, but it's how they tried to do it.
Well, they have more in common.
They do on the right. So this is, I think, part of where this veil is being torn down, that you've got two parties that are on the right of center. And this is why I will continue to argue, and I will take on all comers. Progressive policy is center. It's not far left. So when corporate media and all of these pundits tell you the far left, it's bullshit. It is center, fiscally responsible, socially sound policy. That's center. So what did they do? Did they come to the center? Was Bernie and his folks, were they able to get Biden to come to the center? The answer is no. No, we went to the right. And that is not the way things are supposed to work, right? If you have a people that are center left, and they join with center and right, don't they meet in the middle? I mean, that's how you negotiate, right? But that's not what happened. They came out with a series of policies that they're just shit, complete shit. And I don't say that because Medicare for All wasn't even brought up. I don't say that because federal jobs guarantee wasn't discussed. I don't say that because all of the climate scientists have said that the greenhouse gas emissions caps by the years that they're targeting are bullshit and don't work. I don't put all of that expertise aside. I say it's bullshit because it was performative. That was it. It was never meant to do anything of substance, right? This is like during the Black Lives Matter protests, which are still going on, by the way, we allow allies to paint Black Lives Matter in front of the Capitol building. Well, that's great, and that's a wonderful photo op, but it's performative, not substance. And what we need right now is substance and change. So we have somebody like Biden who's not for defunding the police force, which means my local police force here gets a tank. But we're not going to fund mental health, and we're not going to fund the schools, and we're not going to fund first responders who could diffuse a situation far better than my police force. So
Right.
This is where the craziness comes in. So what is so here's what corporate media was saying about this. So I just want to pull this up here to illustrate what corporate media said about this unity thing. And I just did copy and paste. So CNN, their headline is Joint Biden-Sanders Task Force unveils progressive platform after months of negotiations. So they threw in the progressive platform. No progressive policies were involved in any of that platform. So CNN, what do you mean here? And then NPR, Democratic Task Force delivers Biden a blueprint for a progressive presidency. No progressive policies are included there. So where are you getting this whole progressive presidency? I don't think so.
I think that was a misprint. I believe they meant regressive.
That's exactly right. And then one that was sort of neutral was Time Magazine. How Joe Biden is diffusing tensions with the left. That I think is a little more accurate. He's trying to get the left on, but they really don't give a shit. So I pulled out a quote from the Timepiece, and it says, 4 years later, Joe Biden wants to avoid a repeat. They're referring to Hillary Clinton in the last election. Ever since he stopped Sanders' momentum and won the primary, which he has not and did not, We all saw Iowa. We saw New Hampshire. We saw Maine. We saw Illinois. We had poll workers die here. Don't tell me it was a Democratic primary. But anyway, I digress. Biden has offered a series of symbolic olive branches to the progressive left, from a friendly endorsement video. So you didn't get a policy, you got a friendly endorsement video. Adopting some of Elizabeth Warren's ideas, which were not progressive, they were neoliberal. The left flank of the party appears increasingly united behind Biden. And here's, I think, where the vote blue no matter who screwed progressives. 80% of voters who said Sanders was their first choice now say they plan to vote for Biden, while 4% say they won't, according to the New York Times poll. So this goes back to the only thing that you had of value in any semblance, whether it was real or imagined, was your vote. And when you told polling people that you were going to vote for Biden, even if he did nothing, even if he completely moved to the right further and was entertaining Republicans as a VP nod like Condoleezza Rice, you said that's okay with you. So you allowed him and gave him permission to move further to the right. Had you said, I'm going to hold on to my vote until and unless he does something that actually helps people, working people, the poor and working class people, disabled, minorities, until he actually comes out with solid policy, then I'm going to withhold my vote. Because you didn't do that, you told him it's okay to do whatever the hell you want. And that's what he's doing. So
You've lost all your voting power, right? Completely. You no longer have any power because you're saying to the Democrats that I don't care what kind of shit you serve up on a plate to me, I'm going to eat it.
Well, that's exactly right. Okay, so shout out to Mike Toller. We're going to try and get him on our program here. Mike Toller is now a part of the steering committee for the National Progressive Party. This is, okay, so you have several different progressive party organizations. So you've got the Movement for a People's Party, which is wonderful and excellent, but their activism, they coordinate, like they coordinated the July 11th, where you were supposed to go out to your congressperson's house and protest in front of their house and put it in their face. So they do some really great activism work, but they are not working on the legal foundation for a political party, which is required for ballot access and for candidates. So, so the National Progressive Party is working on that legal framework so that we can have a viable alternative to the two red flavor, blue flavor, single party. But so anyway, good morning, Mike. And he says, when politicians are as far right as we currently have, center is the far left by perspective. So he's absolutely right. So if you're, sane in a room full of crazies, you don't really look sane either by perspective. So
yeah, it's like saying that in a world of people with one leg, the two-legged person is king, right? It's it's not. It's all perspective.
Exactly.
And it's perspective that the centrists and neoliberals want us to view it from, and by putting the word far in front of it, makes it sound evil by nature, right? Like the same way that they say the far right wants are white supremacists. They want to, they're totally racist. They're anti-woman, anti-gay. They're evil. So we're basically just going to change the direction and call them the far left. So if just by that name, I'm giving that an evil connotation, right?
Oh, and that's what they do, right? So my argument is always, hey, I'm sorry that I want people I don't even know to live and thrive. If that's what upsets you, then maybe the problem is you, not me. So Joel pipes up. He's along the same line. So thank you, Joel. He says, Reinforcement and perpetuation of the archaic red versus blue concept is a weapon they rely on, which is exactly what you were just saying, Andy. That yeah, it's they just took that same argument, dusted it off, and changed one word from the far right to the left. So here's this I thought was very telling. This is Liz Smith. She is a neoliberal, democratic establishment.
Shitball.
Well, yeah. So she is a politico who works on campaigns quite a bit, and this was her quote, and I thought that this was very telling. So after the Unity thing came out, and she's a top advisor for or was for Pete Buttigieg, who's still running around here. I believe that Pete is trying to become the president of the DNC, and he may actually get it this time. He tried last time, but nobody liked Pete. But here's her quote. She said,
vote for me, and you get a free subscription to Mad Magazine.
That's pretty much it. So here's Liz, and I don't know why we're asking Liz, but apparently we're asking Liz Smith all sorts of things. She says, people don't need a bomb thrower. They don't need an ideological warrior. What she's saying is, you want people to live, quit crying. We don't give a shit. So you're an ideological warrior. They just want to wake up and know that everything's okay and not have a pit in their stomach when they open the newspaper, turn on the news. And that's something Joe Biden offers. So what Liz is saying is all the Beckys with the latte want to go back to sleep. And you know what? She's not wrong. She's absolutely not wrong. They don't want to think about things that are hard. Oh, it's so hard. People dying, no, so long as it's not me. And then she continues, the things that people thought would be his biggest weakness ended up being his biggest strengths. Really? So, Andy, you ideological warrior, you. So we're going to test this. We're going to test all of this.
Right. And I before we start, I just wanted to say that's why they call it the American dream.
Yeah, George Carlin.
Yes, because you have to be asleep to realize it.
Yes, exactly. So here's what we're going to do. In the last few minutes, for those of you who are just tuning in, Andy is in Canada enjoying his socialism with healthcare during this pandemic. And we are in the United States, America, with our freedom insurance.
And your bootstraps.
Exactly. So we're going to take all of this, the Unity Commission and Liz Smith and all of these things where all these progressive wins that we didn't get, and we're going to put it in the context of a pandemic. So here's my problem. Here's where I become an ideological warrior. In the face of a global pandemic where you literally have people dying, not just over 65, but from 0 on up. And there was a really nice Twitter thread, and I'll see if I can post it here, where a doctor did an entire dedication to the thousands of people under, I think he did under 45, who have died from COVID. So we focus on the mortality rate, and there are people who still think that the flu is deadlier, but discount that this particular illness, and we've talked about it on our network with actual experts, not armchair quarterbacks from Facebook, but actual scientists and virologists, how this particular virus is not just the initial illness, but contributes to heart attack, stroke, embolisms, liver failure, kidney failure, and neurological disorders that can be chronic for the rest of your life. So I've never heard of a flu doing that. This virus does. This is why initially it was described as an HIV-like, because it allows these opportunistic diseases to present themselves and kill you. Right? This is why the CDC is going back over the death rates. So it's not just COVID itself with the pneumonia, but all of these other things that are coming out and killing people. But I'm going to set aside the death rate for a moment, and we're going to talk about cost. the actual cost, financial, since neoliberals like to focus on money, and since this Unity Commission thought it was too divisive to talk about a cost savings plan like Medicare for all, while all of those people are getting socialized health care on our dime, portions of my property taxes pay for their platinum insurance. They're okay with that. So let's talk about the costs. Okay, Dave Gutowski, he's being a smartass. He said face mask protects against 5G. Put a mask on. That's actually going to be an effective marketing tool if you tell people that a mask. Yeah. So, gay frogs and chemtrails. So, all right. So here's your first one, Andy.
Sure.
I need you to not cheat. Do not look at the screen.
My hands never leave my arms.
Okay. Okay, so looking at this came from the CDC. So we're going to look at the cumulative cost of COVID-19 hospitalization rates. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So these are the people who were sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. We started sending a lot of people home when you ran out of beds. So it's not saying that the people we sent home weren't sick enough to go to the hospital. We're just going to look at the ones who were actually admitted to the hospital.
Okay.
So the hospitalization rate of 100,000 people, how many people were hospitalized? And this is, I'll narrow it down for you. Your number, pick a number between 50 to 200. So of 100,000 people, how many people in the U.S. so far have been hospitalized with COVID?
You're talking between 50 and 200.
Yeah.
That's so I'll say 173.
You were really close. It's 107.
Okay.
107 people per every 100,000 has been hospitalized.
Right.
And the highest rates are those over 65. So, so cumulative, it's 107 per 100,000 people. If you just look at those over 65 who are on Medicare here in the U.S., you become eligible for Medicare if you are 64 and a half years old or you're disabled, then you get a slightly different Medicare package. But 65 and older, that number goes up to 316.
Ah.
So that's a lot of people. So if we're just looking at 316 per 1,000 at 65 and up, this group that's not eligible, 50 to 64 years old, how many per 1,000 would you say are being hospitalized? So I'll give you your reference range again, 50 to 200. What number would you pick there?
For that specific, I would say probably 145.
Okay, you were close. You were close. You were under this time. It's 161 people per 100,000.
Okay.
Okay. So to put this, and this is where numbers become abstract, we have 330 million people in this country. So 161 per 1,000, that's a lot of people in the hospital. A lot. Okay, so let's look at those people's, let me see if I can get this to scroll up here. There we go. Okay, so some of the key points here I thought were excellent. So of those people who are in the hospital, and this is all ages, hospital rates are cumulative and will increase as the pandemic continues. So how much more likely is it that non-Hispanic American Indians and Alaskan Native persons are in the hospital? So this is from, I'll give you from 0 to 10 times, 10 being really, really high. How much more likely is it that a non-Hispanic American, Alaskan Native, or those people are hospitalized?
as opposed to white people.
Yes, as opposed to white people.
I would say 6.5 times higher.
You were so close. You're really good at this. This is 5.7 times. So it's more than half as likely. So that's a high rate. And then white persons, non-Hispanic, black persons have a rate. This is worded just bullshit. So I'm not even going to ask you that one. But white persons, comma, non-Hispanic, black persons have a rate approximately 4.7 times. And Hispanic and Latino are 4.6 times. So you have this nice little spread across the board. I noticed they didn't take out black people alone because they're much higher than yeah. Okay, let me pull out another stat here. Okay, so then it just goes on here, and I'll post this so other people can see it. So these are the rates. So now let's talk numbers. What are the costs? All right, so in this country we have insurance, and we have multiple forms of insurance. So you have Medicare, that's over 65 or disabled. Medicaid is if you are uninsured and you meet a certain income level. So that is an insurance for you. Good luck getting somebody to take that insurance. So the disconnect here is we think that insurance means access to healthcare, and it doesn't. It means you get a piece of paper that says you're in the club. Now you got to find some place that accepts this insurance. So that is a huge burden for a lot of people. Like in my county, there are 0 doctors and hospitals that take Medicaid. 0. And my county is pretty typical of counties across the entire United States. So as a disabled person who does not qualify for Medicare and you get a Medicaid policy, you have to find a way to get to a doctor in another county, which could be a 3 or 4 hour one-way trip with your disability and everything else, to see the only doctor or hospital that accepts your insurance. So that's the disconnect that we have here. And then for over 65, we assume that it's really good insurance, but we have made so many cuts to Medicare for over 65 that we have fewer doctors and hospitals that will accept it, because the way that we manage cost savings here is we decide that we're going to pay the doctors and hospitals less to treat you as a patient. So obviously when you have a doctor who's paying $6,000 for a student loan, he can't afford to see too many Medicare patients with that low reimbursement rate. He's not going to be able to pay his bills, right? So this is what we have with Medicare, and every one of these insurance plans has multiple deductibles. There is no insurance plan that has one deductible. You have a deductible for your health, sometimes 2, and then you have a deductible for medication. So do you have all that, Andy? You got it straight?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so it's a little bit different than Canada, but this is what we have. So now we're going to get into the cost. And again, you cannot cheat. Don't look at the screen.
I'm not.
Okay, so
I closed my browser. I just got Zoom up.
Okay, perfect. So this is from Fair Health, and they pull data from insurance and hospitals. This is data that is not necessarily reported by other agencies, but they do aggregate reporting from like Kaiser and other places and kind of pull out the numbers. So 15 to 20% of people who get COVID may need a hospital stay. So we just saw some of those stats. So they're putting it in slightly different terms, 15 to 20%. That's a lot of people who will need some sort of extra care. So the cost, if I have no insurance whatsoever, Andy, if my employer does not give me insurance and I don't qualify. I make too much to qualify for Medicaid. I obviously am not 64 and a half to qualify for Medicare. I have no insurance and I get COVID and I need to go into the hospital and I recover. What is the cost of that care on average? How much?
So I guess my question would be is, how sick did you actually get? Were you just occupying an admitted bed in the hospital somewhere, or did you have to go on a ventilator, and how long were you in the hospital? So I think that those are all parts that need to be considered when you're figuring it out. But I would say, based on what I know about the cost, I would say that the average cost of a COVID-19 patient is about $37,000.
You are so way off. So when we're talking about averages, we're not necessarily leaning towards the ICU because that's on the outer band. We're talking about the person who got a hospital bed and had to get oxygen and fluids and things like this, have their lungs tapped. So general care in this particular pandemic, not necessarily ICU. So this is the middle range. So if you're uninsured and you survive and you walk out of there, now mind you that you made too much for Medicaid, not enough to qualify. You're looking at a bill of $73,300.
Nice.
Nice. So
Do they at least have installments?
Sort of. Yeah, you're good. I mean, legally, if you pay $10 a month, there isn't a damn thing they can do. So just so you know that, people. So like in Georgia, Georgia, I believe, really hates their own people. If you make more than $398 per month with one child, you make too much to qualify for Medicaid in Georgia.
Wait, per month?
Per month. So if you make $400 and you have one kid, you make too much to qualify for Medicaid in Georgia. So let's say you make $400 a month and then you have to go in, so you've got lost wages, and now you're going to get hit with this, let's say, $73,000 bill because you had the audacity to recover from COVID.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. How dare you?
Right. So you owe that money. By the way, your state also reimburses each and every hospital as a bad debt write-off at the end of the year. So the entire state pays it, and then you keep paying your bill to the hospital, so they get paid twice. All right, so Andy, that was uninsured. Let's say that I have insurance, and by some great coincidence, some miracle, the doctors and hospitals that I go to are in my plan's network. So what this means is my insurance company negotiated discounted rates with a set group of doctors and hospitals, and they all happen to be the professionals that I needed. So when we have the shortage of nurses and doctors, and the guy that walks in or the woman that walks in happens to be in my network throughout the entire term that I am there. This is the anesthesiologist, this is the virologist, this is the nurse, this is anybody who happens to come in and look at my chart, happens to be in network, and everything works perfectly.
What a fantastic coincidence.
Right. So what is my cost then, my out-of-pocket cost as an insured person recovering from COVID?
Can I say maybe 10% of that, like 7,300?
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Okay. The answer is $38,221.
So half.
Yeah. And that's how insurance works. Insurance is financial protection from bankruptcy and ruin. However, it offsets costs, and you still have costs that come with it. That's all it is. It is not yeah, this is how it works. So so there was this nice little quote that I pulled out of this. It says, if you have insurance, your cost will be determined by the cost sharing terms of your health plan, meaning it's a contract. It is not a free ticket for insurance or for healthcare.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that I thought you would appreciate that, Andy. This is what we deal with COVID and insurance. So let's take this back to where we started the conversation, where you are an ideological warrior, Andy. Because not only do you think that maybe people shouldn't die during a pandemic, but maybe they shouldn't also go bankrupt, right? So in the United States, these elderly people, the retired people over 65, what do we have? The last statistic was $2 billion worth of bankruptcies. And they have the best insurance that money can buy outside of Congress. They still go bankrupt.
That's insane.
They're losing houses and cars and retirement and everything else because they had the audacity to want to live.
Okay, so my question is, why is this the preferred system of Americans?
It's not. It is the preferred system of the people who own the corporate media and Congress. That's the answer, Andy.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's enough of a counter narrative on mainstream media to make people doubt, like saying that, well, look at Canada, they have huge wait times, which is bullshit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I thought this would be an interesting little social experiment, having you, our Canadian, kind of put in the framework of what we're doing. And your reaction is exactly what I thought it would be. You're like, what the hell?
Well, it's there are costs involved in the Canadian healthcare system, even if we're just talking about the bare bones treatment of and not prescriptions, because prescriptions aren't covered in the Canadian system. There's a lot of different procedures like chiropractic care that isn't, covered by the Canadian government. You basically need to have extra coverage from where you work, which is more common in Canada, right? Because
we don't have that,
jobs.
Andy. We don't have that.
No.
No.
But there is a charge per hospital visit of $6 for parking.
Damn it. So there's this little known provision in Medicare that most people don't read their contract. One of your forms of payment, and this came out of World War II, but it's still in the contract. One of your forms of payment is a pint of blood. So it is your deductible, which I think has gone up to $178 plus a pint of blood. And I think that is just indicative of the way that our healthcare system works in the United States. So
Sure sounds like it.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, the pushback that the pro-Biden people, who are the Beckys with the latte, well, it's just, he's better than Trump. Oh, yeah, okay, I get it. But I guess I'm one of those 4%. I am not willing to give you my vote and my support while you are literally killing people. And just because it doesn't necessarily affect you, or you don't realize that it affects you, doesn't mean that I need to roll over the way that you have rolled over. It's not going to happen. So.
Well, and the question I have is that, when you look at this, right, and your main reason for thinking that Joe Biden is potentially a good president is that, well, if everybody can afford a Beamer, right, then mine isn't special, then there's a problem.
Good point. And that's something that we need to talk about. Maybe we talk about that on Wednesday, is this exceptionalism, personal exceptionalism, and while we're fighting over cookie crumbs, not realizing that the cookie itself has been stolen. So we can talk about that and further piece out this unity platform that is such a win for progressives. Not. So, okay, so we are now way past our time. Andy, any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
No, other than that, I think we're good. I really have to go to the bathroom. So,
Okay. All right. So with that, we're out of here. We will be back bright and early, 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. If you have show ideas or you want to join us here on the show, send us an email, progressiveinsider@gmail.com, or just put it on our Facebook page and we will see it and we'll get you on here too. So with that, Andy, good luck.
I should be able to make it still.
Okay. We'll see everybody else on Wednesday. Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care.